Welcome back to our studios here in Lahore. I'm Hamza Amjad. Now, India is celebrating its Independence Day today after usurping the right to independence of the people of Kashmir. Hundreds of thousands are holding protest rallies across the world to reject India's illegal annexation of Kashmir. The day is being observed as a black day in occupied Kashmir, Azad Kashmir and Pakistan. On August the 3rd, 13 million Kashmiris woke up to find themselves held hostage in their own homes. 1 million Indian troops had imposed a crushing curfew and total communications blackout over the entire valley. The troops were tasked with crushing any dissent. With occupied Kashmir cut off from the world, India announced the annexation of the UN-recognized disputed territory on August the 5th. Kashmiris say they are victims of brute force.
We do not have any freedom or anything. We have been suppressed with the use of brute force.
Adding force to its state terrorism, Indian forces have arrested over 1,300 Kashmiris over the past week. The occupying troops have turned the disputed territory into a massive prison.
We're marking this day as Black Day, as India has suppressed the rights and autonomy of all sects, nationalities and minorities. 10 days before its Independence Day, it has suppressed the special rights of our Kashmiri brethren. Hence, India's Day of Independence is a black day for all humanity.
Expressing solidarity with Kashmiris, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan and people across the country have turned their social media display photos black. There were also protests against Indian atrocities in occupied Kashmir in Islamabad.
It's 15th of August and we are observing this day as a black day.
I strongly condemn the massacre killing in Kashmir.
It's complete brutal action and it's totally against human rights.
International community should break its silence on the murder of thousands of Kashmiris. This is a freedom struggle. We have gathered here in thousands to show the solidarity with Kashmiri people.
In London, thousands gathered in front of the Indian High Commission, waving Kashmiri and Pakistani flags. There were also chants of Khalistan Zindabad. Protesters equated India's unilateral actions with terrorism.
There is no ambulance services, no fire services, no transport. My nephews, my nieces, they are over there.
Totally wrong to capture the countries, totally wrong to occupy the countries. It's going to be second Palestine.
Pakistan's Sikh community also protested India's criminal actions in Nankana Sahib in Pakistan. 3 Pakistani soldiers have been martyred in firing by the Indian Army along the line of control. The Pakistani military says 5 Indian soldiers have been killed in retaliation as an intermittent exchange of fire continues. Military spokesperson Major General Asif Ghafoor says Pakistan's retaliatory firing has injured many Indian soldiers and damaged their bunkers. He said the Indian Army has increased firing along the line of control to divert attention from the precarious situation in occupied Kashmir. This comes after the Indian government unilaterally revoked Kashmir's UN-recognized special status as a disputed territory. While the UN Security Council has decided to discuss India's unilateral revocation of occupied Kashmir's UN-recognized status as a disputed territory. This comes after Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi wrote a letter to the UNSC calling for an emergency meeting over the issue. Talking to reporters, UN Security Council President Joanna Roneka said the meeting will be held on Friday. Earlier, China backed Pakistan's call for the Security Council moot to discuss India's illegal move. Russia's acting UN envoy Dmitry Polyansky said Moscow supports Pakistan's request for an emergency session. International media has slammed India over its hypocrisy of celebrating Independence Day while usurping occupied Kashmir's freedom. This comes after the Indian government unilaterally revoked Kashmir's UN-recognized special status as a disputed territory. Now, French television network France 24 wrote India marks its Independence Day with its secular, post-colonial image in tatters. British newspaper The Independent said intensifying the crackdown, Indian forces have arrested 1,300 Kashmiris in the last 11 days. In its opinion piece, The Guardian wrote India's illegal power grab is turning Kashmir into a colony. American newspaper Washington Post said occupied Kashmir's streets are quiet, but the valley is a dormant volcano. while at least 14 people have been killed after rebels mounted a series of attacks in Myanmar. One of the 5 attacks targeted a defense service technology academy where military engineers are trained. Most of those killed are members of the security forces. The Myanmar military says rebels fired 107mm rockets at the academy from a nearby hillside. The Northern Alliance of armed groups in the region has claimed responsibility for the attacks. The rebels say they have acted in retaliation to the military's operations in their areas. 16 fighters have been killed in Syria as the government forces advance further into a string of rebel-held villages in southern Idlib. The Syrian War Observatory says government forces are only 3 kilometers away from the key town of Khan Sheikhoun. The observatory said 5 government soldiers and 11 rebels are among those killed in the clashes. Earlier, rebels shot down a Syrian government warplane in the northern province of Idlib. War monitors said the pilot who ejected from the Russian-made warplane was captured by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham rebel group. The country's government officials later confirmed the incident. Turkey has started its reconnaissance missions in northern Syria as part of a recent safe zone agreement with the US. Turkish Defense Ministry said drones are surveying the area where a safe zone for the return of refugees is to be created. Ankara said efforts are underway to set up a joint operations center in the country's southeastern province of Sanliurfa. The statement has not yet provided further information on the drone's operations. The US and Turkey reached an agreement on August the 7th over Ankara's security concerns along its southern border. Yemen's southern separatists have rejected the Saudi-led coalition's demand of withdrawal before Aden's city truce talks. The Saudi-led coalition and separatists have locked horns over the control of Aden. The coalition has withdrawn its earlier offer, asking the separatists to retreat from the Yemeni government seat of power. Foreign Minister Mohammed al-Hadrami called on the Southern Council to hand over arms to the government of exiled President Mansour Hadi. The separatists effectively took over the port city on the weekend by seizing government military bases. The Southern Transitional Council spokesperson Saleh Al-Noud demanded that rebels be removed from positions of power in the south. The US Justice Department has applied to seize the Iranian oil tanker hours before Gibraltar was poised to release it. The Iranian vessel was detained by British forces on July the 4th under allegations of smuggling oil to Syria. The Gibraltar government has halted the release of the vessel, saying it is now considering Washington's application. The country's Attorney General office said government was not expecting any such application from the US. Meanwhile, the captain and 3 officers of the Grace One have been released by the government. US President Donald Trump has tied a trade deal with China for the humane resolution of protests in Hong Kong. Asking China's President Xi Jinping for a one-on-one meeting, President Trump said Xi can quickly resolve the issue if he wants. The US president said his Chinese counterpart is a great leader who has the respect of his people. Trump said positive developments were made during a telephone conversation between the US and China's trade negotiators. He predicted that Beijing will reciprocate Washington's recent decision to delay the imposition of additional trade tariffs on China. Trump said the trade war between both countries was hurting China way more compared to the US. In Hong Kong, police have fired tear gas at protesters who gathered outside a police station in the residential area of Sham Shui Po. The protesters were shining laser beams at the police station and burning the papers of Chinese religious idol Joss on the roadside. The demonstration, titled as a religious laser light vigil, was organized by activists to mock police warnings. Earlier, Hong Kong police officials announced enforcing laws against illegal violence. Police have arrested 5 people on the suspicion of illegally assembling, attacking police and holding aggressive weapons. Increasingly violent protests have plunged the Asian financial hub into its most serious political crisis in decades. Now, tens of thousands of South Koreans held a vigil against Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, demanding an apology from Japan for atrocities committing during World War II. The rally in Seoul came as South Korea celebrates its 74th Independence Day from Japanese colonial rule. The protesters have denounced Abe for his government's decision to impose curbs on exports of some high-tech materials to South Korea. Earlier, South Korea's President Moon Jae-in said he is ready for dialogue with Japan to end the trade dispute. Tensions between the two countries have soared recently, culminating in the withdrawal of each other's preferential trade status. The trade dispute was triggered when a South Korean court ordered Japanese firms to compensate wartime forced labourers. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says she will explore any option to avert a no-deal Brexit. She has urged opposition Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn to set out a firm stance on Brexit. Nicola Sturgeon did not rule out backing Corbyn. She suggests that a general election or a second referendum on leaving the EU will be the best thing.
I think the best thing in a Westminster context would be for there to be a general election or a second EU referendum to give people the opportunity to change tack. But we work with anybody. I think the thing for Jeremy Corbyn, though, is he has to finally and firmly come off the fence on Brexit and stop trying to equivocate and prevaricate.
And in the UK, the opposition Labour Party says it will soon call a vote of no confidence against Prime Minister Boris Johnson. If successful, Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn plans to lead a caretaker government that would delay Brexit and call a snap election. In a letter, Corbyn asked other opposition parties and Tory rebels to install him as interim Prime Minister.
Hope that they will all support the motion of no confidence that I will put. And that will ensure that this government then cannot continue with this headlong pursuit of a no-deal Brexit, and that would mean a caretaker government led by Labour.
Moving on, Italy says Spain has offered to take some of the migrants from the Spanish rescue vessel. Earlier, a court in Rome ruled the ship carrying 147 migrants will be allowed to enter Italian waters. The court said humanitarian conditions aboard the vessel permitted its crew to take migrants to safety. The court ruling did not say whether the ship was allowed to dock in Italy and disembark its passengers. The vessel was anchored 5 miles off Lampedusa, hoping to get medical evacuation for those on board. But Italy's far-right Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini has vowed to stop the ship. Salvini said he would appeal against the court ruling. French President Emmanuel Macron has marked 75th anniversary of the Allied invasion of Provence in World War II. Flanked by his Ivorian and Guinean counterparts Alassane Ouattara and Alpha Condé, Macron paid homage to African veterans. The ceremony took place at a military cemetery in Saint-Raphael. It holds the remains of 464 soldiers who were killed during the invasion of Provence. Operation Dragoon took place in 1944, 2 months after the Allied invasion of Normandy. African troops in particular paid a heavy price, with 55,000 killed over the course of World War II. Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis has asked the EU for more help in fighting wildfires. The blaze has razed tracts of pine forest on the Evia Island as authorities declared a state of emergency. Over 227 firefighters, along with 6 helicopters and 6 aircrafts, are battling the fire. Local villages have been evacuated and an appeal for help has been made from Greece's European neighbours. Mitsotakis said the effects of climate change call for a better rescue mechanism across the European Union.
We know that wildfires will be with us. They will be part of our, as they've always been, but they've been more part of our daily life as climate change is taking its toll on southern Europe, and that is why it is imperative at the European level to strengthen the rescue mechanism in order to have more coordination at the European level to fight incidents like the one we had in Greece.
Italy said it would send 2 aircraft following an appeal for airborne firefighting equipment from Greek authorities. Now, moving on, a Norwegian government delegation has arrived in Venezuela to restart talks between the opposition and government. Opposition leader Juan Guaido said no specific date and time has yet been planned for the negotiations. Talks to resolve the country's political crisis were halted last week after President Nicolas Maduro's allies pulled out. Maduro also refused a scheduled round of talks in Barbados to protest the opposition's support for new US sanctions against his government. The Norway-backed talks began in May following a failed uprising against Maduro, but have not yet yielded any official results. Meanwhile, a coalition of 13 US states have sued President Donald Trump's administration over a new immigration rule. The legislation drastically reduces legal immigration by denying visas to poor migrants. The rule, unveiled on Monday and to take effect from October the 15th, expands the definition of a public charge. It allows denials to visa applicants who fail to meet income requirements or who receive public assistance. Experts say the rule could cut legal immigration in half and could be the most drastic anti-immigration policy yet. In India, the monsoon death toll has risen to 270 people. 105 people have been killed and 50 are missing in Kerala alone. 2 weeks of heavy monsoon rains have left 1 million people displaced and thousands of homes destroyed across 6 states. The Kerala, Karnataka, Maharashtra and Gujarat states are among the hardest hit by floods. Heavy rainfall triggered dozens of landslides in Kerala. Nearly 0.2 million people are still living in relief camps. More heavy rainfall is expected in the next 2 days in parts of Karnataka, Maharashtra and Gujarat. Well, New Zealand says it made a mistake by allowing the Christchurch attacker to send letters from his prison cell. This comes after a letter written by terrorist Brenton Tarrant circulated online. The letter was full of Islamophobia and white supremacist hate speech. Tarrant killed 51 Muslims at 2 mosques in Christchurch on March the 15th. Prisons Minister Kelvin Davis said the New Zealand's laws allow prisoners to send and receive mail. He said Tarrant sent 9 letters from prison so far, 2 to his mother and 5 to unidentified recipients. But Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said the gunman should never have been allowed to send any letters from prison.
No one wants extra trauma for the victims, extra trauma for Christchurch, and ultimately no one wants this alleged offender to be able to spread his message of hate in the way that he's being able to. Now we have to make sure that we just do everything we can to prevent this kind of thing happening again.
Meanwhile, Kenya's Environment Court has blocked the construction of a coal-fired power station on the country's Indian Ocean coast. The fossil fuel project is the first of its kind in Eastern Africa.
Every day, Thabit and Ali go fishing. They both come from families who have relied on the sea for generations. It is their livelihood, but they are concerned about the future, now that their archipelago is threatened by a coal-fired power plant project.
The disaster is going to come from that coal plant, is going to reach up to Nairobi. So just imagine about the Lamu people, you know. So many people will believe they're going to have problem with their health, like cancer disease, you know.
In June, those objecting to the development won a huge victory. The National Environmental Court had ordered to stop the controversial project.
We didn't think it would happen. We saw that the government is very fair. We're very happy.
But it's not a done deal. An appeal to proceed with constructing the power plant can still be made, and the Kenyan government can override any final decisions. The coal-fired power plant is part of a much larger development project that includes the construction of a port, roads and pipelines to develop the northeastern part of the country. Residents are concerned such developments will disrupt the delicate ecosystem, as well as contribute to a decrease in tourism, which is still fragile after an Englishwoman was kidnapped and her husband murdered in 2011.
Tourists, most of them, they won't come Lamu as they used to come, will be like few years back.
The Lamu archipelago is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, renowned for its Swahili architecture, beautiful beaches and mangroves. Following the initial decision in June barring any construction, developers were ordered by the court to carry out a fresh environmental impact assessment, the results of which are still pending.
Now, Kiev is withdrawing its soldiers from the front line of the conflict with separatists in eastern Ukraine. But Ukrainians who live in this area fear that their government is too eager to make peace with the rebels. Many say once Ukrainian troops are gone, they will be more vulnerable than ever. Thousands have been killed since the war in Ukraine's Donbas region started 5 years ago. His promises to end the conflict was part of what got former comedian Volodymyr Zelensky elected president. Over the past 2 months, Kiev has withdrawn its troops from the conflict zone. But many locals say this is a bad idea.
We are afraid that Russian-backed separatists may cross the border by the river at night and occupy the village. It's quite a possible scenario, and then life will be over.
The withdrawal of Ukrainian soldiers from the Stanitsia-Luganska region could be particularly consequential. The area is a bridge between territory claimed by the Ukrainian government and the self-proclaimed Lugansk People's Republic. Most residents are mainly concerned about the economic fallout of a divided Ukraine.
This was our second life, now it was cut off from us. We have been living in Lugansk all our lives, working there, doing trade. It's been a year already without Lugansk. Nothing to live on, no money to pay the gas bills. Products we sell are so cheap and no one needs them. We are barely surviving without Lugansk.
Others say when Ukrainian troops leave, they will feel unsafe in their own villages. While most people in eastern Ukraine want peace, they don't want their government to give them away either. Now, every year in Togo, the sea nibbles more than 2 meters of coastline away and up to 10 meters in some parts of the coast. Coastal erosion affects all of West Africa and is distorting Togo's landscape, driving out fishing communities. Take a look.
Along Togo's coast, just east of the capital Lomé, villagers are feeling the devastation of sea level rise. Only the remains of this fishing village are left standing. Kojo and his family had to leave their fisherman's cabin when the water began to rise.
The house, everything, there's nothing left. We're here suffering. We are suffering. I don't know where we're going to be able to stay right now.
The sea reclaims up to 10 meters of land on this coast every year. Entire communities have been forced to flee. In Bagida, 500 people made a living from fishing. They have not received any government assistance to relocate or rebuild. A glance towards the horizon reveals a likely culprit for the coastal erosion, the constant stream of gigantic cargo ships in and out of the port of Lomé. Locals allege that after the port's construction in 1967, the sea level began to rise.
Climate change, with its warming effect on the planet due to melting glaciers and rising seawater temperatures, is an aggravating factor in coastal erosion.
In all, 3,000 people have been displaced by the rising sea level. Several hundred others are awaiting their fate, anxiously watching the waters.
On a lighter note, rooftop farming is taking off in the Big Apple. This is thanks to the efforts of a company named Brooklyn Grange, which has 3 rooftop farms in the city. The newest one lies on top of an 8-story building spanning 55,000 square feet out of a 140,000 square foot rooftop. Take a look.
Brooklyn Grange made its debut in 2010 with a rooftop farm in Long Island. The concept was meant to maximize locally grown produce and put rainwater that would be wasted to good use.
The purpose of the farm is to grow as much food as we can. It's to manage millions of gallons of stormwater, to create an example of what we can do with our ecosystem to continue to make our cities as livable as possible going into the future.
Their latest farm is sandwiched between views of the Statue of Liberty and the Empire State Building in Sunset Park. The farm grows a wide variety of vegetables, including tomatoes, leafy greens, peppers, and eggplants.
This is 140,000 square feet, and it's our largest farm so far. It's our 3rd farm that we've done in about 10 years. And we have about 1.5 acres, about 60,000 square feet of outdoor growing area. We have a 5,000 square foot greenhouse, and we're also building a large event space.
New York City officials say rooftop farming and other green practices could save the city government $2.4 billion in over 20 years. Brooklyn Grange co-founder Ben Flanner says he hopes the trend will take off in other cities as well.
A trainee volunteer fire brigade in a southern Polish village is made up of only girls. This is not uncommon in the village where no boy has been born in almost a decade.
It was during a regional competition for young volunteer firefighters when local media noticed something unusual about Miesta Odrazhanskie. The village team only comprised of girls. The reason being, no boy has been born in the village since 2010.
We normally do rescue operations, putting out fires, helping out with various accidents. If there are storms, we also try to help.
These girls are not only preparing to fight fires, they are also fighting gender stereotypes. With women greatly outnumbering men, the girls are being trained to do what are traditionally perceived as male roles in Poland. The youngest member of the volunteer firefighter team is only 2.5 years old.
I'm very proud of the women who are in my fire department. They are really determined people who put a lot of heart into what they do, and it bears fruits. The fact that we can be on alert, we help our resident, and these are, of course, the most important things.
The shortage of boys is so acute that the mayor has offered a cash reward for the first family to produce a son. Most girls on the teams aren't bothered by the absence of boys. They say their priority is to get a new fire engine.
Welcome back. Now, first up in business news, Germany's economy shrunk in the second quarter, raising fears that the world's fourth biggest economy could be headed into recession. The country's gross domestic product contracted by 0.1% between April and June. Year on year, Germany's economy grew by just 0.4%. The Federal Statistics Office said during the third quarter, data trends point to another contraction in German economy. Economists define recession as 2 consecutive quarters of GDP shrinkage. The government blamed the second quarter contraction on Germany's exposure to the trade war between the US and China. The Federal Statistics Office said German exports fell faster than imports in the second quarter. The German economy last rank in the third quarter of last year and has not rebounded strongly. European stock markets have opened flat after steep dives in the US and UK bond yields heightened fears of a global recession. London's FTSE 100 is down 0.25% in early trading. Other European indices are marginally higher in hopes that central banks will act to boost growth. Asian stock markets closed mixed after taking an early pounding on investor worries of a worldwide downturn. Tracking overnight losses on Wall Street, Australia's ASX 200 dived nearly 3%, while the Nikkei 225 in Tokyo lost over 1%. But the Shanghai Composite recovered to record a small gain led by technology stocks. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index rose by 0.75% as mainland investors hunted for bargains. The Kospi rose 0.2% after President Moon offered dialogue to end a trade dispute with Japan. First up in sports, Sri Lanka trailed New Zealand by 22 runs with 3 wickets remaining at the end of day 2 of their ICC World Test Championship opener in Gale. The hosts ended the day at 227 for 7 in reply to the Kiwis' 249 runs in the first innings. Kusal Mendis and Angelo Matthews scored half-centuries for Sri Lanka to put them in a good position. Ajaz Patel took 5 wickets for 76. Sri Lanka's Akila Dhananjaya also took a 5-wicket haul, restricting New Zealand to a small total. In the MLS, Zlatan Ibrahimovic scored twice as LA Galaxy beat FC Dallas in Carson, California. With this win, LA Galaxy have ended their 3-match losing streak and earned their first win over Dallas since 2015. Ibrahimovic scored both goals in the second half, with the latter one coming from a spot. He remains third in the MLS goal-scoring ranks behind Carlos Vela and Josef Martinez. LA Galaxy will face the Seattle Sounders on August the 18th. Well, it's 32 degrees Celsius here in Lahore, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that was all I have from the news bulletin at the moment, but don't go anywhere. I'll be back in just a few minutes with the news headlines. As always, thanks for watching.